The Unfinished Symphony of Arthur Finch. Part 1, A Discordant Silence. The first rehearsal of the Westview Community Orchestra. It was a tradition, a cornerstone of my life with Eleanor. For 40 years, she'd been in the cello section, her back ramrod straight, her bow moving with a quiet grace. I'd always sat in the small, worn seats at the back, just listening. Now it was just me. The air in the community hall was thick with the scent of old wood and rosin, a familiar comfort that now felt like a shroud. The conductor, a perpetually enthusiastic man named Mr. Harrison, tapped his baton. The cacophony of instruments tuning began, a jarring sound to my ears today. My wife Eleanor passed 6 months ago. 40 years, a lifetime, and now a vast echoing silence. My house, once filled with her quiet hums, and the rustle of her turning pages, felt hollow. My days, once structured around her routine, were shapeless, blurred. I watched the cello section, an ache in my chest. No Eleanor, just an empty seat where she should have been. It was a foolish hope, I knew, but a part of me still expected to see her there, her hand poised over the strings. During a break, while the other musicians chatted, a woman in the flute section, perhaps in her mid-60s, sighed softly. She was frowning at her sheet music, tapping a finger against a tricky passage. She had a bright floral scarf around her neck, a splash of color in the otherwise muted room. I found myself walking over. "Trouble with the allegro, ma non tanto?" I asked, surprising myself with the words. It was Eleanor's favorite section. She looked up, a hint of frustration in her kind, tired eyes. "Oh, yes, it's a beast. I just retired, and my fingers aren't as nimble as they used to be." She offered a small, hesitant smile. "Clara Jensen, Arthur Finch," I replied. The third note in that run, try hitting it with a little less breath. A softer attack. It'll lead into the next phrase more smoothly. She blinked, then her eyes lit up. She lifted her flute and tried it. A subtle shift, but it worked. The notes sang effortless. "Oh, you're right," she exclaimed, genuinely surprised. "Are you a musician?" "No," I said, a faint smile touching my lips. "Just an enthusiast. My wife played cello for decades. I learned a lot just by listening." A flicker of understanding passed between us, the kind that comes from shared experience, from unspoken losses. "Well, thank you, Mr. Finch," she said, her voice warm. "That was truly helpful." "My pleasure, Miss Jensen." I walked back to my seat, a strange sensation stirring within me. It wasn't happiness, not exactly, but it was a flicker, a small, unexpected spark in the pervasive silence of my days. That night, lying in my too-large bed, the house quiet around me, I thought of Clara Jensen, the way her eyes had brightened, the floral scarf. And for the first time in months, my thoughts weren't solely on Eleanor's absence, but on a brief, shared moment of presence. Part 2, Finding the Tempo. Days turned into a week, then 2. My routine settled back into its familiar, somber rhythm walks around the neighborhood, reading the newspaper, staring blankly at the television. The quiet was a constant companion, sometimes a comfort, often a heavy weight. But even amidst the quiet, Clara Jensen's image lingered. Her warmth, her resilience, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of music. I found myself checking my phone, a small flutter of nerves whenever it buzzed, hoping it was her. One Tuesday morning, I went to the Daily Grind, a small, independent coffee shop on Main Street. Eleanor and I used to come here every Saturday for bagels and coffee. The aroma of roasted beans still brought a pang of nostalgia. I was waiting for my usual black coffee when I heard a familiar, bright laugh from a table near the window. No, you can't just skip those eighth notes, Ethan. We're not playing jazz yet." I turned. There she was, Clara Jensen, sitting with a young boy and girl, likely her grandchildren. Judging by their bright, energetic chatter, she was patiently guiding them through a children's music book, a small, worn flute case at her feet. My heart gave a quiet jolt. Should I approach her? It felt almost intrusive, interrupting a family moment. But before I could decide, she looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Mr. Finch, what a surprise," she said, her voice warm. I smiled, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "Miss Jensen." "Indeed. Small world. Grandma, who is it?" The little girl with bright red bows in her hair asked. "This is Mr. Finch, sweetheart," Claire replied. "He's a very wise music listener." The boy Ethan, a whirlwind of energy, piped up. "Are you a grandpa too?" I chuckled, a genuine sound I hadn't heard from myself in a while. "I am. No grandchildren of my own, but I have 2 wonderful daughters." Clara laughed. "It's a different kind of busy, isn't it?" "That it is," I agreed. "Are you enjoying retirement?" She sighed, a wistful sound. It's an adjustment. So much quiet. After decades of classrooms full of noise, it's a shock to the system. But these two keep me on my toes. She gestured to the children. I can imagine, I said, thinking of my own quiet house. I've found myself with a lot of empty time lately, too. We talked for a while longer, the children occasionally interjecting with questions about their music. Clara spoke with such passion about teaching, about the joy of seeing a child finally grasp a melody. Her energy was infectious. Well, she said eventually, looking at her watch, these two have a soccer practice to get to. Of course, I said, a flicker of disappointment. Then taking a breath, I ventured, perhaps if you ever find yourself with a free moment, we could grab a coffee without the orchestra practice? She smiled, a genuine open smile. I'd like that very much, Mr. Finch. I really would. We exchanged numbers, our fingers brushing lightly as we did. That small touch sent a ripple through me, a faint echo of something I'd thought long dead. As I walked home, the coffee cup warm in my hand, my thoughts drifted to Clara, her vibrant scarf, the sound of her laughter. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a gentle sense of anticipation. Part 3, a shared melody. For the next few days, Clara Jensen occupied my thoughts. Her warmth, her resilience, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of music. I found myself checking my phone, a small flutter of nerves whenever it buzzed, hoping it was her. By Thursday afternoon, I couldn't wait any longer. I sent a text, my thumb hovering over the send button. Hello, Miss Jensen. This is Arthur Finch. I was wondering, would you be free for a cup of coffee this weekend? Her reply came quickly, almost immediately. My heart actually skipped a beat. That sounds lovely, Mr. Finch. How about Saturday at 10 a.m., back at the Daily Grind? It felt like preparing for a first date, a feeling I hadn't known in decades. A strange mix of excitement and trepidation. I told my daughters I was meeting an old college friend, a white lie, but one that felt necessary. Saturday morning, I woke early. I spent an unusual amount of time picking out a shirt, checking my reflection more than once. I didn't want to look too eager, but I wanted to look presentable. I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early, choosing a quiet corner table. The morning light streamed through the window, and I felt a nervous energy thrumming beneath my skin. Right on time, Clara walked in. Even in casual jeans and a light sweater, she exuded a quiet elegance. Her eyes found mine and she offered a gentle smile. Good morning, Mr. Finch. Did you wait long? Not at all, Miss Jensen. Just got here, I lied, standing as she approached. We ordered our coffees and the initial awkwardness settled between us, like a light mist. We talked about the weather, about the latest community news, but slowly, naturally, the conversation deepened. I've been thinking a lot lately, I confessed, my voice softer than I intended, about how quiet my house is now and how much I miss having someone just there. She listened, her gaze steady and understanding, just like she always did. Retirement is a strange thing, she said. Suddenly, all that structure, all that purpose gone. The silence in my own home, after a lifetime of noisy classrooms, can be deafening. Exactly, I said, feeling a surge of relief that someone understood. It's like you're adrift, and the loneliness, it's a constant hum. She looked at me then, her eyes reflecting a shared vulnerability. All the time, she murmured, especially at night. When the house is quiet and the TV is just noise. That's when it's hardest. I feel that too, I admitted. Even when my daughters visit, when they leave, the quiet is absolute. A comfortable silence fell between us, filled with unspoken understanding and empathy. I don't quite know what this is, I said, breaking the quiet. But I haven't talked like this in a very long time. Truly talked. Neither have I, Arthur, she said, using my first name for the first time. Neither have I. We lingered long after our coffee cups were empty, sharing stories of our lives, our hopes, our small regrets. For the first time in years, I felt seen, heard, and cared for. Eventually, we left the cafe and walked through the small park across the street. The mid-morning light was soft, bathing the trees in a gentle glow. Would you like to do this again? I asked carefully. She smiled, a quiet warmth spreading across her face. I'd like that very much, Arthur. As I walked home, my heart felt both heavier and lighter. Heavier with the weight of my unspoken grief for Eleanor, but lighter with the surprising, fragile hope of a new connection. Part 4, Harmonizing Souls. After that, our weekly coffee became a cherished ritual. Sometimes we walked in the park. Other times we'd browse a bookstore. With each meeting, I felt something shift inside me, a gentle thawing of a long-frozen part of my heart. It was in the way Clara would ask, "How was your week, Arthur?" and truly listen, her eyes attentive, never distracted. It was in her soft, knowing smile when I shared a silly anecdote. It was the calm stillness that settled over me when I sat beside her. She gave me something I hadn't realized I desperately needed: genuine presence. One crisp autumn afternoon, as we sat on a bench overlooking the community pond, Clara turned to me, her eyes pensive. "Arthur," she said quietly, "something feels different lately." I looked at her, a knot forming in my stomach. "Strange how, Clara?" She didn't meet my gaze, instead watching a duck glide across the water. "After we part, when I go home, it feels emptier than before. Silence hurts more. It's like I don't want to be alone anymore." My heart thudded softly in my chest. I exhaled slowly. "I feel the same," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I think about you more than I probably should. I know I shouldn't, but..." She gently cut me off, her voice trembling slightly. "Why shouldn't you, Arthur?" I hesitated, then looked at her. "Eleanor, my wife. She passed 6 months ago. It feels like a betrayal." Clara nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I understand, Arthur. I lost my husband, David, over 10 years ago. It's a different kind of loneliness. And the guilt, even years later, can be a heavy burden. But sometimes we can't help what we feel. And sometimes healing means finding new connections. With you, Clara," I said, the words surprising me with their force. "I feel alive again. I haven't felt this connected in years." She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was a deep mutual understanding. "Me too, Arthur," she whispered. A comfortable silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of our shared confessions. Then very gently she asked, "Would you like to come to my place tonight? My grandchildren are with their parents. I just don't want to be alone tonight." I searched her face. There was no pretense, no artifice, just a profound loneliness and a quiet request for companionship, for warmth. "I'd like that very much, Clara," I whispered back. We walked together to her home, a cozy bungalow on a tree-lined street. The living room was warm, filled with books and framed family photos. On a small shelf above the fireplace, a picture of a younger Clara smiling beside a man who must have been David. I paused, a pang of discomfort. She noticed. "He built this house with me, Arthur. Every corner holds his memory, but it's okay. You're here." She made us chamomile tea, and we sat close on the sofa, listening to a classical music station. At some point, without thinking, my hand found hers. Her fingers were warm, a faint tremor in them. "Will you stay tonight, Arthur?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, unable to speak. That night, we didn't rush. We simply held each other, the quiet comfort spreading between us. We talked, and sometimes we didn't, and in the silence, I felt a warmth that reached parts of me that had been cold and desolate for years. Her presence was like the first signs of spring after a long winter. We shared the same bed that night. Nothing hurried, nothing loud. Just a soft, almost sacred closeness. And when I woke the next morning, sunlight spilled into the room, a gentle answer to a question I hadn't even realized I was asking. Later that day, I received a text from her. "Thank you for last night. It's been a long time since I didn't feel lonely." I replied simply, "Me too. When can I see you again?" Part 5, the crescendo of choice. A few more weeks passed in this quiet, careful rhythm. Clara and I met once or twice a week, finding solace and companionship in each other's presence. With her, I felt lighter. I laughed more. I remembered parts of myself I thought had disappeared long ago. But the guilt was always there, a soft, persistent hum beneath the surface of my newfound contentment. One afternoon, I went to the local bakery, a place Eleanor adored for their blueberry scones. Without thinking, I ordered 2. As I held the warm bag in my hand, a sudden pang pierced through me. I was in a way cheating, not just on a memory, but on a promise I'd made decades ago. Even if the love had faded into quiet companionship, the vow remained. And yet I couldn't deny what I felt for Clara. That evening, I brought the scones home to my eldest daughter, Sarah, who was visiting. "Oh, Dad, blueberry scones, my favorite," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. "I remembered," I said, placing the bag on the counter. She smiled, a real soft smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "Thank you, Dad. It's delicious." And just like that, I felt torn. Her smile brought back a flood of memories. Younger days, family vacations, Eleanor's laughter filling the kitchen. But those memories felt distant now, like faded photographs. Later, after Sarah had left and the house was quiet again, I sat in the living room, surrounded by Eleanor's familiar belongings, and thought of Clara, her gentle eyes, her quiet strength, the way she looked at me, not as a broken man, not as a widower, but just as Arthur, still capable of connection, still worthy of being held. And the strange thing was, since meeting her, I'd been kinder to my daughters. More patient, more attentive. I was becoming a better father. Because I was finally emotionally nourished again. Perhaps this was wrong. Perhaps it was selfish. But a part of me wondered, what if this too was love? A different kind, a second season? I didn't have the answers. I only knew that, after so many years of drifting, I was finally anchored. Part 6, A Night Without Loneliness. It had been about 2 months since Claire and I first met. That day, like many others, we were sitting in our usual corner of the daily grind, the soft hum of conversation and the scent of roasted coffee beans, filling the air around us. We talked about simple things at first, books we'd read, the upcoming community fair, a particularly challenging piece Mr. Harrison had chosen for the orchestra. But then something shifted. Clara put her coffee down, her eyes focused on the swirling patterns in her mug. "Arthur," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper, "something feels different lately." My heart tightened, already knowing what she meant. "I know I probably shouldn't say this," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But when I see you, when I talk to you, I don't want to go home afterward. It's lonelier," she added, her voice barely audible, "when you've remembered what warmth feels like." My chest ached at her raw honesty. I reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I feel the same, Clara," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Since meeting you, I think about you every day. And when I'm not with you, I miss you more than I can explain." She smiled, a sad, warm expression. "But we shouldn't, should we?" There was a pause, heavy with unspoken questions. And then I said, "Why not?" "Because of Eleanor," she answered gently, her gaze steady. I looked away, a fresh wave of guilt washing over me. "I know, and I don't want to hurt anyone. But what I feel with you, it's real. And it's been so long since I felt anything real." She didn't answer right away. Then after a long, quiet breath, she asked, "Would you like to come to my place tonight? My grandchildren aren't coming today, and I don't want to be alone. Not tonight." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to desperately so much. "I'd love to, Clara," I finally said. Her bungalow was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of old books and a faint, sweet aroma of cinnamon. Photos of her family lined the shelves, young faces frozen in moments of joy. One photo in particular caught my eye. A younger Clara, smiling beside her late husband, David. She noticed me looking. "He passed over 10 years ago," she said gently. "This house, he built it with me. Every corner holds his memory." I turned to her. "Does it feel strange having me here?" She shook her head slowly. No. It feels comforting, like the house is finally breathing again." She brought us mugs of herbal tea, and we sat beside each other on the couch, listening to a slow, melancholic cello concerto on the radio. We talked about everything and nothing, our shoulders brushing now and then, until finally the silence between us felt like an invitation, a soft hum of shared understanding. She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. "Stay tonight, Arthur," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Please." That night, we didn't rush. We didn't need to. We moved gently, carefully, learning each other's hearts before each other's skin. Every glance was a question, every touch an answer. It wasn't about passion, it was about presence. About two souls finding a quiet harbor after years of solitary wandering. It wasn't fireworks. It was a soft glow, warm and real. And when morning came, sunlight spilling through the windows, I didn't want to leave. But I did. Before I left, she pressed a hand to my chest. Last night was the first time in years I didn't feel alone. I kissed her forehead. "Me too, Clara. Me too." Later that afternoon, she sent me a message. "Thank you for last night. I didn't feel lonely for the first time in a long while." I stared at the screen, a profound warmth spreading through my chest. "Me too," I replied. "When can I see you again?" Part 7, The Color Returning to My Days. After that night, our connection deepened, becoming a quiet, essential part of my life. We began seeing each other more regularly, sometimes for coffee at her place, other times for a quiet lunch in the park. Slowly, gently, we started sharing more pieces of our lives, like two people rediscovering what true companionship could feel like. Every time we met, it felt like the world became a little softer, a little brighter. The days had shape again. The colors returned. I found myself waking up with something to look forward to. I even started humming while shaving, and I paid more attention to the way I dressed. One day, we took a long walk through the sprawling arboretum near her home. The sky was painted in soft oranges and violets as evening approached, and the late spring air carried the faint scent of blossoms. "You seem lighter these days, Arthur," Clara said, looking up at me, her eyes reflecting the fading light. I feel lighter, Clara, I replied, and it was the honest truth. Before I met her, my days had been one long sigh, a heavy, endless gray. But now I laughed more. I listened better. I even found myself caring more for the people around me, including my daughters. Oddly enough, being with Clara made me a better father. I started baking Eleanor's favorite apple pie for my daughters again. Not every week, but enough to surprise them. One evening, my youngest, Emily, found me kneading dough in the kitchen. She looked at me with curious eyes. "Dad, since when do you bake pies?" "Thought you might like it," I said simply. Her smile was real soft, a little surprised. "Thank you, Dad. This means a lot." And for a moment, I wondered, was this wrong because I hadn't baked for them in years? Not until someone else made me remember how much I liked giving, how much I missed being needed. That night, as I washed the dishes, I thought of Clara, of her warm hands, her quiet laughter, the way she looked at me like I was still someone worth knowing. It wasn't just attraction. It was comfort, recognition, something tender, something unfinished, something that felt like it had been waiting all my life. And yet I was still a father, still living in a house full of memories of the woman I'd built my life with. My daughters barely noticed my frequent outings. Maybe they did notice, but they no longer asked. We'd grown used to silence, to space, to living beside each other, but not with each other. I didn't blame them. And yet I couldn't help but feel a little forgotten. Is it so wrong to find joy again? I wasn't hurting anyone. If anything, I was being kinder, more attentive. I'd become someone who smiled again, someone who cared. And Clara, she had come alive too. She told me her grandchildren noticed, that she laughed more, played more, that she no longer dreaded the quiet evenings. And so I began to wonder, maybe what we were doing wasn't breaking anything. Maybe it was giving something to each other and to ourselves. Two people, two broken pieces, finding warmth not to replace what they lost, but to remind themselves that love of any kind could still exist. Could that be so wrong? Part 8, a glimpse of guilt, a return to grace. It had been about 2 months since Claire and I started seeing each other regularly. We kept it simple, quiet lunches, gentle walks through the park, coffee shared in sunlit cafes or her cozy living room. It became our rhythm, our little sanctuary from the world. One day I went to the grocery store, as I often did. As I passed by the bakery section, my eyes landed on fresh blueberry muffins. For some reason, I paused. Eleanor used to love blueberry muffins. In fact, they were her comfort food. After a particularly stressful day at her volunteering gig, "Two, please," I said to the baker before I could change my mind. At home, I laid out the muffins. The sweet, comforting scent filled the kitchen. It reminded me of old mornings, of laughter around a full breakfast table. When my daughter Sarah walked in, she blinked in surprise. "Oh, blueberry muffins? You got these?" "You like them," I said, placing one on a plate for her. She smiled a soft, almost childlike smile, one I hadn't seen in years. "Thank you, Dad," she said gently. She looked touched, and in that moment my heart twisted. I sat across from her at the table, watching her eat, and all I could think was, what am I doing? Because even if we had grown apart, even if the words between us were few and far between, she was still my daughter. And Eleanor was still the woman I had built a life with, and I had brought someone else into my heart. But then I looked at her smile again, and I realized I wouldn't have done this for her a month ago. Back then I was numb, absent. Since meeting Clara, I had returned to my family as a more engaged person, a better version of myself. I wasn't running away from my past. I was discovering a new path forward, a way to be whole again. And perhaps through that rediscovery, I was returning home differently, more whole. Clara, too, seemed to flourish. She told me her grandchildren noticed, that she laughed more, played more, that she no longer dreaded the quiet evenings. And so I began to wonder, maybe what we were doing wasn't breaking anything. Maybe it was giving something to each other and to ourselves. Two people, two broken pieces, finding warmth not to replace what they lost, but to remind themselves that love of any kind could still exist. Could that be so wrong? If something in this touched your heart, a like and a subscribe would mean a lot.